know if you've got a particular reason. Let me know if you've got a particular reason why psychological safety is of interest to you, or if you're just coming along because it's a good thing to do to broaden your thinking and horizons. As is also the case, just in case you don't know me, my name is Lucinda. I've got a background in learning and development, and my day job is to be the founder and CEO of Actus, performance, talent and learning management software. In terms of what that software is, for those of you who don't know, essentially what we're about is helping organisations to retain, develop and engage their people. That's what we want the software to be able to do. And the way we do that is by embedding more engaging management behaviours in it. Because quite often we know that we all go to work. Well, we may not go to work, we may go to our home office and work, but our line managers still play a massive part in the extent to which we are motivated or feel engaged to deliver our best. So the solution that we offer, that's all about trying to help you to keep your staff, but more importantly, keep them engaged and motivated. And actually psychological safety is a key aspect of that. So when we're talking about psychological safety, or what are we going to cover in this topic? I'm going to talk about the definition of psychological safety, or definitions in terms of where we went with it, why it's so relevant at the moment in a hybrid world. I'm going to touch on neuroscience and psychological safety, and just some practical tips as ever. I always like to come up with things that I believe would be practical, and as ever, really, really appreciative to any of you that want to share your thoughts and experiences. We do tend to find through the webinars, do feel free to engage in the chat. We've had people network and build relationships off the back of the chat, and that's brilliant. So just looking what the answers are so far in terms of why you're interested, and actually I'll put the slide up because I asked that question. So what interests you about psychological safety? And if you haven't had a chance to tell me yet, please do feel free to add to the chat while I just catch up with these. So yeah, Richard, you were talking about how it leads into employee engagement and plays a part in development and performance, which I think it really does there. It's interesting. I actually don't know the answer to this, and I don't know if the research has been done as to whether it's one and the same with engagement, but you can definitely see there are going to be links with engagement. So if your organisation is interested in improving engagement, psychological safety has got to be something worth thinking about and being alert to. Sue, you're saying it's coming up in the context of creating a positive and productive working environment. Yeah, retention and hearing. Yes, it also does link to diversity, doesn't it? So all of these things are a bit of a perfect storm, which is the very hot topic as well. Sonia, it's important, and you've started to measure it in your employee surveys. Interested in that, Sonia. What questions would you be happy to share? What sort of questions you ask to measure it? I have some questions on here which may link in, but it would be great to know what you do as to whether there's some specific questions that you're adding in there. Anybody else like to or be happy to share what interests you in this topic? Jane, great one actually. So how can you kick off an environment with your new team, establishing that sense of psychological safety so that you can culturally embed it? And it is actually something which is quite cultural. And we all know how challenging it is to change or develop culture. So focusing on something like this is quite a specific way in which we can enhance culture. So do feel free if anyone else wants to tell us why this is a relevant or interesting topic to you in the chat. And the follow-on question for this is, so some of you have already heard of it, interested, what would you say it means? If someone said to you, what do I mean by psychological safety? Would you know, is it something that you intuitively understand? Or is it one of those jargon words that we have the pleasure of using too often if we're in HR related roles, like engagement or the many, many things that we might have? What do you think psychological safety means? What does it mean to you? I know it always takes a bit of time for the catch up. And maybe if you don't feel so comfortable about a definition, what do you think the potential benefits of them? And actually Jane's gone straight in there with something, and Richard there. So yes, so it's about being yourself and to be able to make mistakes and learn from them. So there's no blame. Richard's got there, the word that springs to mind is trust. So having a high trust culture, and absolutely right. So when we talk about trust, which is linked again to productivity and effectiveness. That's the main way in which we can really generate high productivity, retention, people feeling valued. So it fits there. So we trust that there's not going to be any negative repercussions for us in the circumstances. Valuing well-being, so seeing it, our psychological well-being, says Glenn, is as important maybe as our physical well-being, which is useful as well. Also, Sonia's going to comment on her the statements. That'd be interesting. So nice. Okay, so she's going to give some examples there. So how is a mistake fit? That's great. Steph is saying it's about being trusted and supported. So it's a two-way process. And that has got to be the case, very much so. It's about us and our relationship with our line manager, predominantly, probably, but also our peers, and maybe how we perceive the organisation overall. So the definition, let me go to an official definition. So Dr. Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School was seen as one of the originators of psychological safety, and there are a few other key people who've come up with it. There's also, I think it was in 1990, someone called William Kahn originated the term. Apparently, it's always hard to actually drill into who invented it. These things become, it's like engagement, who actually invented engagement. And actually, engagement is just a term. These are things that have existed for a long time. Psychological safety has existed for a long time. It's just whether we name it and see it as being important. So the definition by Dr. Amy Edmondson said that psychological safety is a shared belief by members of the team that it is a safe place for interpersonal risk-taking. So I'll say it again, it's a shared belief by members of the team, so it's how we believe about within our team, whether it's a small team or a wider overall organisational team or culture, that it's a safe place to take interpersonal risks. So it's about how people might respond to us. And it is very much about us having a sense of belonging, and we can link into what those benefits are, and I'll talk to those more further in a moment on my next slide. I'm just going to see if there's any other definition that I put in my notes, because I had to do a bit of research for this. Well, one of the other things that they came up with, which we're looking at, it's where we know it exists when we are not afraid to be our true selves. I think one of you said that. That's exactly what Jane said earlier, when we feel that we're focusing on how we perceive other people's perceptions of us. So we feel comfortable to be our true self. We don't have to put a mask on and pretend to be something we're not. That means that we feel able to take risks, make mistakes, raise problems, ask questions, and disagree with each other. And of course, we know that in a remote environment, some of these might be more difficult, and we'll explore that. One of the other principles that come through from this is that if we have fear or blame in an organisation, that is a key indicator of low psychological safety. And that's the sort of thing you want to address. So if we can banish fear, then you're going to actually create psychological safety and get real performance-based accountability and nurturing environment, which is going to be healthy for the future. So some of the definitions there, and then the benefits that you see coming through, and obviously there's other benefits as well, but the research benefits that seem to be coming through, that if someone's got a sense of belonging, and that's one of the foundational ones, I feel like I belong here, then we're much more likely to stay with an organisation. And we all know that right now, retention is a major pain point, if you like, retention and recruitment. Recruitment's painful, so you do want to retain your talents that you have right now. The other key point here, and I think this links into whether it does link with engagement, I see it as being very close to engagement, is that if people feel psychologically safe, they want to contribute. They feel almost like they've got skin in the game. They feel valued, they feel bought into the overall organisational goals. So they're more engaged. I think that's what it fits. They're more engaged in the overall purpose. So if they feel that way, they're stepping out of just belonging into wanting to contribute. It also means that if we feel it's okay to make mistakes, to take risks, that's how we learn and grow, and that's how the organisation learns and grows. If we feel we have to cover up or hide mistakes for fear of the finger being pointed, something going wrong, then that actually stores up bigger issues. When you think of some of the massive disasters that have taken place, often that's because there was someone lower down the organisation was too fearful to raise a concern or something that could be improved at an early enough stage, because they felt it would be poo-pooed or not taken seriously. So it has quite a key one for actual risk management, is if people feel psychologically safe to flag things. And I think that's different from whistleblowing, because personally, and I disagree with me if anyone disagrees with me, but I was thinking about this. You see whistleblowing, but generally I see that that's something that happens when the environment perhaps isn't psychologically safe. So you have to step out, step away from it. You don't feel safe to challenge. You have to go to an external source. You have to sort of put yourself out on a limb in order to blow the whistle about something that's going on. So for me, having to whistle blow as opposed to raise a concern within your organization that will be taken seriously, that feels like to me like an example of a non-psychologically safe culture. Do you agree or not? That's my own summation. But ultimately, if you have got a psychologically safe environment, you get greater innovation and creativity. Yeah, so you agree with it? Good. Good, Santi. Steph, yeah, fear, blame, lack of safety means this leads to whistleblowing. So it's not a solution, is it? That's one thing. When you see these organisations, we should allow people to whistleblow, put in that process. Actually, if we want to get at the cause, maybe psychological safety is a better way of getting at the cause of it. So working on those. So if we want to work with to build that, so teams with high psychological safety, and is it Jane who's just about to establish your team, then this is the sort of thing you might want to share with them. And incidentally, if any of these slides are useful to you, we send them out to you automatically. You'll get them later today or tomorrow as a PDF that you can link to and utilise. So teams with high psychological safety, they have respect for each other's competence. So we see, you know, each of us has a part to play. And for me, that also links to things like respecting diversity. So we don't know, diversity isn't necessarily all about ethnicity or gender. It's also about our different ways our mind works, our different skill sets. So we respect the different competences that we all bring to a situation. They also care about each other as people. So that's interesting. That's that belonging, that feeling of being a team as opposed to a group, actually being bothered, actually wanting to put yourself out to help that next person, as opposed to being slightly dissociated. And I think there's something there we can think about this whole long-term hybrid working, whether that's caused a bit more challenge. And they trust. So trust, that was the term that came up by Richard. They trust each other's intentions. So they've not got that suspicion. If any of you have ever seen the work, and I think I've done a historic webinar on this, I'll see if we can dig it out, maybe Caitlin, it's going back probably a while, but the one about the dysfunctions of a team. So Patrick Lencioni talks about the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and one of that is about that foundation of trust. And I would say that those dysfunctions of a team is very much would link into psychological safety and how you build it, if you build that team together. In fact, anything you look to do with team building, even the very simple Tuckman, which talks about forming, storming, norming, performing, in order to storm, you have to feel safe enough to have conflict or to disagree with others. And actually, that's one of the things why teams are not necessarily always as successful as they should be, because they don't feel it's safe to have that conflict. And therefore, maybe because the psychological safety isn't there, they never get to that true level of innovation and high performance. So what would we look at in terms of the mindsets associated with psychological safety? And you've already told me some of them. So the key mindsets here, I got this from, the source here is Timothy Clark, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, Defining the Path to Inclusion and Innovation. And basically, these are the sort of questions, and perhaps these would play into, was it Sonia or Steph who had the survey? Your survey. So yes, it was Sonia. So the sort of questions that you might ask might align with these. And he talks about these different levels, and I think that these build. So you might start off by wanting to feel included. I feel that I belong here. And if you think about when you're bringing people into an organization as a line manager or as an HR person, are we facilitating for people to feel included as early as possible? So are we helping them to do that? And if we feel like, and I think one of the reasons, particularly where people joining organizations during lockdowns and things like that, it was hard for them to get that human contact and get that sense that they felt that they belonged here. So that's the first point. So inclusion, I feel that I belong here. And definitely it's something that's useful for us to make sure that we are creating that sense of belonging. If it doesn't happen automatically, we might take it for we might take it for granted, and we need to work harder on that when people are not necessarily together face to face like they might have been 2 years ago. Once you feel that you belong here, and obviously you can tell people that they belong, and it's things you can do as a leader to help people feel like they belong. The next step is people feeling safe to learn and grow. So again, thinking of that new starter, do I feel safe to ask questions when I don't understand things? Do I feel that it's okay to go and ask someone elsewhere in the organisation if they will help me? It's almost, is it safe for me to not know all the answers? And again, as leaders, we could say it's fine for you to not know all the answers. We're trying to create, if you're a trainer, I work with a lady called Michelle Parry-Slater, who's a great trainer, and she will drop things all the time, reinforcing these points about helping people. It's absolutely fine to ask questions and not know the answer. That's a key part of learning. So psychological safety is key to learning in many ways. Then the next step, which is really where we're going to start getting value as an organisation. So we need people to come beyond those inclusion and learner stages. In my opinion, those are more internal. Then it goes to contributor. So do we feel that our comments are valuable and will be listened to? So for example, thank you to everybody who feels able to share their comments. And I realise we're not a team, so you don't, but please feel psychologically safe that any comment you put in the chat is really valued. And actually it really helps anybody else who's here in terms of their, often people get other value from it. So you're helping someone else if you put something in the chat. It encourages someone who may feel less confident about putting something in the chat. And it helps us actually make this less of a one-way conversation and more of an interactive webinar, which we all learn more from. So how can I try and create more psychological safety in doing a webinar or something like this? So the point here is your thoughts and comments are really valuable. So how helpful is it to know that someone on this chat, Sonia, has actually already got questions in their survey about measuring psychological safety? I think that's really useful, really interesting. Maybe she's a good person to reach out to. Sorry, Sonia, you might get inundated. The point is, though, we want people to feel that their thoughts and comments are valued and will be listened to. And then once we go beyond that point is I've contributed, how we can feel that we care enough to share an alternative view and trust it will be respected. So for example, if you don't agree with what I'm saying, feel free to put that in the chat. If you've got an alternative view, because actually that's where we can think about things, we can broaden our understanding. And that's the next level, because there is something there, I think, about personality. Some people are more naturally able to challenge. The interesting thing about that is if you think about some of the people who might challenge you on a training course, they're not actually well, they feel psychologically safe. I don't know how aware they are. What you really want is those people who are naturally more quiet, and perhaps they're sitting there thinking, I don't think this is the right answer, but I don't have the confidence to share. They're the ones we want to feel safe to speak up, because they're the ones that might spot the hole in the pipeline or the issue that we've forgotten. And maybe thinking about personality types, you've got a very extrovert group of people, they can't get a word in edgeways. How can we help them to feel confident enough to challenge and speak up? So those are the mindsets and the sort of questions, I suppose, that this is what you want people to think. And I wonder if they link to the questions you've got there. People, if you were writing a survey evaluating people's psychological safety, whether those measures were in there. Why do we think they are more important in a hybrid world? Do tell me, what do you think? Do you think they're more important in a hybrid world? I've got an opinion that they are. Maybe I'm not saying they weren't important before, but I think they might be more important in the hybrid world. So feel free to tell me why you think they might be, or maybe you're just thinking those through. Reason I think they are likely to be more of a priority is that physically we're further apart. Right, we are, even with the government saying that we can get back together, people have got into the habits of working more remotely, so we are physically further apart. So it's easy to feel less included. Talking about that new starter, if you haven't got that personal relationship, it's so much harder. You've not made than if you went into an office and you've made eye contact with the person next to them, offered to get them a coffee from the coffee machine. To ask them for help is much more natural to feel part of that thing. It's hard to feel a sense of belonging when the only place you're going to work is your bedroom office or the end of your garden. And the thing here, so it's like that new starters have fewer opportunities to bond and get that sense of belonging. There's also potentially, because everything has all the meetings that we have, there may be less opportunities to share or challenge opinions informally. So one of the things that I've heard people say is that they don't get the chance to, everything's scheduled. So you don't have that kind of, oh, have you thought about that? I just wondered. Those slightly informal conversations where people might just raise something they were wondering about, trigger a thought in someone else, because they don't get those informal interactions with certain people, then maybe, and if that person that they would need to interact with informally doesn't ask for their opinion, then those opinions may never be shared. We know that it is key for retention, and learning and growth is a key tool for retention. If people don't feel a sense of belonging and don't feel that they can learn and grow in an environment, then they're going to leave. And also this whole thing about well-being, which was raised by you, there is a greater sense of fear and anxiety generally at the moment, and not helped by war. The latest, it's been one thing after another. So the environment that's out there is anyone who has a tendency to be anxious, there's more stuff to feel anxious about. And that means that our level, maybe our general sort of level of resourcefulness, feeling able to challenge psychologically, may be less so. So likelihood of us challenging may be reduced. Let's see what you guys, so Steph said, the hybrid world has highlighted the importance of safety outcomes. So well-being and safety overall, so our overall health and our psychological health. And again, this thing like, how do we keep people, and focus on those priorities. And building and maintaining rapport and relationships, which is harder potentially in a hybrid world, is key to achieving psychological safety, says Richard. Absolutely. So I think we're all on the same page here. I was interested in something I'd looked at before in relation to neuroscience, and it's something that I'm quite interested in at the moment in relation to anxiety. I'm actually, one of the things I challenge myself to do, as a random aside, is I'm doing a qualification in hypno-CBT. I decided I needed to learn something last September, and I needed to challenge myself. And one of the things they're talking about is how it is linked to psychological safety, but our whole fight or flight response is very linked to anxiety and general well-being. It directly links to our heart rate variability, and the understanding that a lot of the time we generally, as human, ultimately we're humans who have this fight or flight response. Our autonomic nervous system has created this great thing that, when we were cave people, if we saw a bear on the horizon, we might choose to fight it or might choose to run away. Now, the problem is, what we've done is we've internalized that to such an extent that just a comment from somebody, or a ping, or an email, or just our very busy everyday life is often triggering people's fight or flight responses. And so we are not relaxing as much as we might want to, which is triggering anxiety. Add into this all this other uncertainty, etc. All of those things are creating more challenging environments, which is lower for our well-being. So this does link to psychological safety for me, and that these aspects here on the screen, I'll explain what the context of them are, key elements that sit underneath psychological safety in relation to neuroscience. So essentially, I'm saying this is someone called David Rock's research, and who's saying that our brain is wired for safety, and we want to try and use as little energy as possible, which is where you might hide or withdraw. And people who are hiding and withdrawing, they're not going to be contributing and challenging. So if we want to think about other things that might be at the detriment to psychological safety, or we need to be aware of, then these aspects here, status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness, all play into it. So my take on this is, and I'll go through each one, is some of this I'm going to look at it in relation to hybrid working, and the uncertainty that's out there. So status is about how we perceive our relative importance to others. So we feel, so it's not necessarily about our job title, although that would play a part, but whether we feel that we're viewed as being important. Do we have status in the eyes of others? So that does link into your idea of belonging. But if we think about the hybrid world, it could be that some people feel that they've lost status because they don't get to chat to their manager on a daily basis, or that senior manager, they don't see them walk past down the corridor and says, oh, hi, Lucinda, how are you today? They don't have those connections with people, which may make them feel inherently less valuable. So maybe there's less contact with senior members of staff. They might perceive they have less career opportunities. So of course we could think about, is there anything we can do to address those, that maybe gives people, maybe senior members of staff could do breakfasts or something like that, where people still feel that they get that informal contact, which gives them both belonging and a sense of status, that they are viewed with status and they have a status or gravitas in that organisation. Certainty, well, that's what it says on the tin, right? Our ability to predict future outcomes. I don't think I can think of a less certain time that I've lived through. And so undoubtedly, most people, even the most resilient, are challenged a bit by certainty. So that's something that's tricky. Now, what can we do in terms of our business environment? And again, businesses, there's lots of business uncertainty out there. How can we create certainty? Well, the only thing I say there in terms of useful stuff for change is whether you can communicate what's not changing in your organisation. It seems obvious, but in an environment of lots of change, helping to reassure people about what isn't changing, what's staying the same, what we're going to go back to, this way of working, this rather than everything being new and different, that can really help people reduce their anxiety and feel great, certain. I know that although I'm not going back to the office 5 days a week, I'm going back to my same desk, same office 1 day a week, and I can depend on it, and my team will all be there. So there's some sameness about it. Autonomy. So autonomy is something that is about people having that control over events. And you could argue, I think, that many of the people who've really liked remote working, who've been able to remote work, they've liked that autonomy over their day, or their things, or those people who feel they've got that sense of autonomy. So that can be, I'd say, hybrid working can provide autonomy. Where there is a risk is if you have a mandate or people start to feel that autonomy is going to be threatened. And the real key is it's about engaging and involving people in making the decisions about where and how they work, as opposed to telling them it's got to be a certain way. So working with people rather than dictating it. Relatedness, well, that's good old belonging. So we've talked about that already, and the sense to which we feel part of something, connected to others, feeling that there's that kind of those healthy relationships where we trust and we're valued within those teams. And then finally, fairness. This is an interesting one, where people, if they feel that there's an inherent unjustness about things, then that will threaten people's psychological safety, and they potentially walk away from a situation. Well, how might that play out? I wasn't sure that was so majorly relevant, but then I thought, so what if I'm more visible? So let's say we have performance related pay in our organisation, and I just happen to be working in project teams that the person who influences or measures my performance sees me much more and sees my contribution than the next person. Or this whole idea of proximity bias, that maybe I work more closely with certain people rather than others, or see that senior manager, and that means that therefore just because they've seen me recently, they think of me to offer me that key project opportunity. Well, actually, that isn't a level playing field. So there is something about the lack of visibility that we have in organisations, potentially, or physical visibility, that could lead to inherent unfairness. Now, you can address that to a certain extent through systems and thinking about it, but it's just worth thinking about, is there an opportunity for unfairness? Because that will undermine people's psychological safety. So there's a little bit technical there, but I thought it's worth just exploring that. But the reality of this is a threat to any one of these domains is actually interpreted in our brains almost like, like the bear. We interpret sort of psychological threats in a similar way in our brains to actual physical threat to life. And so that's why we can understand that sometimes there's anxieties that come, that people really, there's a lot of anxiety out there, and a lot of that is an over-exaggerated fight or flight response going on for people. So what can we do as leaders to support psychological safety? Well, I think it's quite useful for us to be explicit if we're working with a team or as an organisation, to say there is uncertainty out there, but you know what, it's absolutely fine for us to learn together or work together or make sense of it. But there is uncertainty, this is what is certain. So also reassure people of what is certain. In terms of involvement, we need to seek out people, give them the chance to explicitly respond. And that can mean that we need to think about how our virtual meetings are operating. They may have become quite because actually everyone's on so many meetings, they're all kind of just going and do that report. How are we creating the time sufficiently for people to actually be asked what they think, to be involved and have the time to discuss things? Appreciating, thanking people for contributing, and encouraging others. So if we're in a team meeting or on a Zoom or whatever it might be, and say, thank you so much for that contribution, it's really useful. Who else? What other thoughts are there? Encouraging those who are a little bit more tenuous, attentive to actually come on and speak. Valuing difference of opinion, seeking out others. So actually, yeah, I'd love to, who's got a view on the other end of the spectrum? Who could disagree with this point? Who wants to play devil's advocate? So really helping people to think more challenging. You could do something like De Bono's thinking hats, I guess, because that's all about taking on different perspectives, not feeling threatened by those different viewpoints. As a leader, we don't know all the answers. Just so putting your hands up, saying, this is where I am, so I don't know all the answers. What are your thoughts? Recognizing and welcoming where we learn from mistakes. You know, mistake is an opportunity for us to do things better next time. It's an opportunity for growth. Other things are in terms of teams. If we're part of a team, what can we do? Can we offer to support others in other teams? How can I help you? So ask them the question, what can I do to help? To show we're willing to engage in our time there. And proactively being prepared to share resources, skills and knowledge. So putting stuff back, putting ourselves out there. And this can be done in a hybrid environment. But some of these, if we can get face to face, it's quicker. And it certainly helps maybe if we supplement it. Those are just thoughts that I've got. What thoughts do you have? Would love to hear any other thoughts you've got in terms of supporting psychological safety. Certainly, I think maybe surveying it and thinking about what you can do specifically, raising awareness in your line managers of what sort of climate have they created in terms of their psychological safety. So I'd get you to think about what you might do. I was going to ask, I forgot to ask it actually, I was going to ask a poll of where you thought your organisations were themselves in terms of your level of psychological safety, your own team or your organisation. I'm going to say, if I was going to get you to generalise, I'll just pop this poll up just out of curiosity. It's anonymous really. Where would you say your overall organisational culture is currently? Do you think, if you were going to say, where would the majority be? Where would people sit? Do you feel that they belong? Do you feel safe to learn and grow? Do you think they feel that they can contribute? Do you think they feel able to challenge? Is it something along the journey? And obviously it will depend from team to team. Let's give you a moment. I'll give you a moment to think at this in terms of your overall culture. And I tell you what, I'm going to ask you is give you the opportunity to actually say, where do you think you are? Or maybe think it yourself, I won't get you to, but why don't you think, where do you think you are in your organisation? You want to pick all of them? Yeah, or maybe it isn't an either or, Jane. Maybe it isn't. That's quite a tricky one. So we're quite spread is what I would say here. So those of you are actually 33% inclusion, 33% contributor, 33% challenger. And maybe it isn't something that has to be, maybe it is personal, maybe it isn't something that you have to be in one of them. Maybe you go up and down it. I might have to go back and look that up. It didn't come through from what I read. Again, maybe if anyone knows that out, please tell me. Okay, so what thoughts have you got? What do you think you might do if you're interested in this? Is there anything that you can take from that you might do? Or is there anything else that you want to do on this? Or have you got any questions? So please do feel free to either comment on what you're going to do or add any questions that you might have on there. What I'll do is, while I allow you to do that, I'll just pop up our final questions and I'll run through our final surveys and things. So as ever, we always put up this. I found that when I used to do webinars, that actually I didn't even tell anybody what they were or give anyone the opportunity to get in touch. So if you are interested in a follow-up on any of the things we do, whether it's training, whether it's our new 360 now, I'll just tell you what these are and what our next things are. You can put in the poll and I'll be able to download and I'll come back to you after the session. Just to let you know, if you've ever considered 360 feedback, and I guess you could use it for psychological safety, building on Sonia's ideas. So if you wanted to ask questions of people about how psychologically safe, have that as one of the questions within a leadership 360, then you could do that. you could actually do a survey on how psychologically safe people are, then you could use a tool like Actus 360 now. So this is a new product that we launched on the 1st of March. We've always had 360, but the key about this is it's completely standalone from our performance management tool. So it can be just used ad hoc, or we offer it as a managed service if you wanted to run something. So if you want to know more about 360, if you thought about that, I'm actually doing, I will be doing a few webinars on it over the course of March and April. So keep an eye on Caitlin's emails, or let me know if you'd like to know more about that. In terms of what's coming up in terms of what we do here, we are doing our HR Uprising Coffee Club. Many of you probably are HR Uprising listeners or members of the LinkedIn group. So if you want to join that, it's just informal networking where we facilitate it and break you off into groups, ideally with similar type organizations where you can chat about things. And the topic we're talking about next Wednesday is talent attraction and retention. Actually, Caitlin, if you can just pop the, if you've got Measly, pop the Eventbrite links, might be just easier for the audience rather than wait for the slides to come out. And then the other two webinars, those are the topics we're going to talk about: learning culture later on in March and engagement in April. And we have open management programs coming up as well. Change Superhero is in flow at the moment. Oops, so, and there's all the useful links. So these will come out on the slides for you. So if you want to know any more about these, please do let us know. The Coffee Club link is there, Caitlin, and perhaps if there's any other useful links, drop into the chat. If anyone wants to ask any questions or chat further, then please do feel free to get in touch or add it into the chat. Stop recording.